Tonight. We've got, in 1914, a man by the name of Walter from Canada that actually stayed alive during the 4 years of World War I. But the fellow soldiers found him on Flanders Field with his dead horse beside him. He'd been hit by a bolt of lightning, him and his horse, and paralyzed, and so they had to send him back to Canada to recover. It took years. But he learned to walk, however, with a cane. It was 2014. Well, 10 years later, he went to the mountains with some friends to hike and to fish, and he was able to keep up. But he was near the water's edge under a tree as a storm rolled in, and bang! Again, lightning struck the tree and him. And so he was paralyzed again. Took him 2 years to learn how to walk. And down in 1913, he was in a park with his family. And against all odds, the third time, struck by lightning. Worse than ever. Went to the hospital, didn't ever walk again. 2 years later, he died. Crazy. Crazy. But it didn't stop there. In 1934, 4 years later, lightning struck again in the town, and it left its mark on his gravestone. Quite a story. But I want to talk about lightning storms. And we're going to read some scriptures here. That man, you could say he was on strike. Anyways, I got some laughs out of that one, Kath. Matthew chapter 8, we're going to read about a storm that, and a couple of storms in the Bible here, but let's read in Matthew chapter 8. And then Jesus got into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples, and suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake with the waves breaking into the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Lord, save us." In the King James Version, it says, "Don't you care? Save us." And, well, the Bible says that Jesus responded, and why are you afraid? You have so little faith. And then he got up, he rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. And the disciples were amazed. "Who is this man?" they asked. "Even the wind and the waves obey him?" It's just a great story. So I want to talk about storms to begin with. That weather and life are unpredictable. They try to predict the weather in Fayetteville. But it can change on a dime. And you just don't know. Well, so it is with life. Storms kick up. Floods come in. Problems happen. We've all seen financial floods where you just can't touch bottom. You're way over your head. We've all had experiences with physical ailment, and we just don't know what's going on. It just overwhelms us. At the time when we have a crisis, I remember out here a couple of New Year's Eves ago where little Valerie was choking, and we're all absolutely flipping out. And John's doing his best to bring her back around, and she's passed out until, when stuff like that happens, it takes us by surprise. And there's storms that all of us are going to experience. It's just life. Being in this world, storms are part of it. Doesn't matter where you go. Doesn't matter. There's going to be storms in the world, wherever you go. And they're not so fun. But I want to talk about these lightning strike kind of storms. In Ecclesiastes, it has a verse, and people can never predict. Oh, that's not the verse. I guess I missed it. Yeah, I did. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, let me read it. Ecclesiastes 9:12 says, people can never predict when hard times might come, like fish in a net or birds in a trap. People are caught by sudden tragedy. Things happen. Things happen. You know, in the Philippines, I was preaching a crusade, and I remember that as, you know, we're just starting the crusade, and I remember just a couple of drops. Ding, 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 ding. A couple of drops. That happens in Arizona. But when that happened, the entire place ran. They cleared out. And I'm like, what's going on here? And everybody's just splitting. Well, you know, they've experienced so much that they know what's coming soon after that, and they took off for cover, and sure enough, there was just a torrential downpour that unexpected, but they saw the signs of it, and so things happen. But sometimes it's not just drops or even an outpouring. Sometimes it's flat out vicious storm, lightning strikes, and tornadoes. I was reading in April 27 of 2011, a size 4, I think a category 5 is the biggest, but a tornado size 4 plowing through 6 miles of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, is a little college town. And this tornado was a half-mile wide. A half-mile wide tornado. Can you imagine? It destroyed 4,700 homes, damaged thousands more than that, injured 1,500 people, and 50 lives were lost. Terrible, terrible strike. And sometimes things hit in such a way that you know, it's like you just wake up in the morning from the next day and your world is completely changed. It happens. These lightning strike kind of storms, and God's people had experienced them. Again, it might be finances, it might be physical, it might be just persecution from family and friends that are coming against you, or you know, so many things that can happen, and you just can't prepare for it. You can't prepare yourself for it. David, in the Bible, King David, famous man after God's own heart, but there's a time where, in Psalms 55, where he made this a psalm, but you know, you could pick up where he's at. My heart pounds in my chest. Terror of death assaults me. Fear and trembling overwhelm me, and I can't stop shaking. Oh, that I had wings like a dove, that I could fly away and rest. I would fly far away to the quiet of the wilderness, and how quickly I'd escape far from this wild storm. Why the pounding in his chest? Why the terror? Why the trembling? Why the shaking? The wild storm. Caught him by surprise, and if I could escape, I would. You can't. You can't escape it. And so this is something that happens probably across the board, each and every one of us in our lives. I'm not preaching this because it's going on, and I'm not preaching it and prophesying that's going to happen, but things happen. They just happen. And let's move on to this last thought. Storms are going to come, agree with me. Lightning storms are going to come. And you know what? Amazingly, you think, okay, God, I've been tested by fire. I'm still here. Well, if it's good times, man, milk it. Milk it. Because lightning does strike more than once. Things happen. They just do. So, let's talk about after the storm. After the storm, without Christ, you just can't make sense of things. You can't. There's no way you can put it together. get mad, you get upset, there's blame, there's fingers, toward God. How could you let this happen if you're all love and you just can't make sense of things. Without Christ, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. Because I'm telling you, things happen that just will blow your mind. And, well, with Christ, though. With Christ. Jesus, as the disciples are in a storm, he wanted them to know some things. In the text that we read, storm kicks up, and Jesus is sleeping quietly down in the bottom of the boat, and the waves are coming over the top of the boat, and it's rocking every which way. But Jesus just keeps on sleeping. He hears a ruckus. He's not passed out. He's sleeping, and so he hears the ruckus, whatever. But he's just laying there, and not worried about it all. But he's trying to tell the disciples something. Be at peace. You're going to be okay. Don't sweat this. I'm not going to let this even so much as bother my rest. I'm not going to panic, not in any way. And so he's trying to let the disciples know you can be at a calm in storms. But he didn't want them to just know that. He wanted them to know something, that he could put the wind and waves in check any given time. And he did just that. He got up, he said, guys, what's your problem? What is your problem? And they're all panicking. And so he's just like, be still to the wind and the waves, and everything just went to calm. Immediately, just a sudden calm. And so here they are. Who is this man, was their comment. That even the wind and waves obey him. Who is this man? Job made a comment in the Bible in regards to the water and the waves. And so he's talking about God putting a limit on them and said, this far, but no farther. Stop, you wind and waves and you waters, right here. You're not going any further. Not any further. This is where you stop. And so, God's in control. He puts the wind and the waters in check. And so this is now after the storm, and there's the calm. They're think, you know what? Jesus had it right. And he can calm the winds and the waves. But Jesus also wanted them to discover who he really was. They made a statement after what we read. Who is this man that the wind and the waves? But notice they were still calling him, who is this man? Who's this man? Well, it took another storm for them to discover who Jesus really was. So let's look at another text. It's a little bit lengthy, but it's another storm. And it happens to be 6 chapters after this storm that we just read in Matthew chapter 8, now in Matthew 14, and we're going to read another storm. And immediately after this, Jesus insisted that the disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. And after sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble, far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. And when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified, crying out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke up, "Don't be afraid. Take courage. I'm here." Peter called out, "Lord, is it really you? Tell me to come to you." And walking on the water, and Jesus said, "Come." So Peter went out of the side of the boat, and he walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to seek, "Lord, save me," he shouted. And Jesus immediately reached out, grabbed him. You have so little faith. Jesus said, and why do you doubt me? And when they climbed back in the boat, the wind stopped, and the disciples worshiped him. Look at the change here now. You really are the Son of God. The Son of God. So the storm kicks up while they're obeying Jesus. You notice they didn't want to go in the boat to the other side. It's not like they wanted to stay with Jesus. They were probably reading from the shore line, the clouds coming in, and they're thinking, this is not a good time. This is not going to be easy to get to the other side. And so they're fighting with Jesus, but he was strong about it. Get in the boat. Yep, get in the boat and go to the other side. While they're obeying, sure enough, a storm kicks up. You know, you'd think that if I'm obeying God, if I'm doing what God wants me to do, why is this going on? I'm tithing. Why this bill now, this unexpected several $1,000 bill? We're obeying God. We're trying to obey and trying to follow. And so they didn't want to go. And now they're facing the wind against them, the waves smashing about. They're being tossed every which way. And yet, as we read the story, and as they soon found out, he was all the while watching them from the mountain that he was praying in. He knew what was going on. He's watching, and he's praying for them. You know, I was just talking to another pastor about a time where, you know, it was my second time of scuba diving. The second time of scuba diving. The first time was the night before. And I got rescued from 100 feet underwater. And my first time scuba diving, after I got finished with my class. I got rescued. It's a big story right there. But then the next day we went, and the day turned into night because we couldn't get back to the coast. Well, long story short, we're out there for several hours, can't get in because of the currents. So I got my light out and I started flickering the lifeguard tower, and they came out, and the guy cursed me out, just cursed me out. You effing black, and you know, but he said this, he said, we've been watching you for hours. And before we got in, we saw 3 other scuba divers out there, floating way out there. But we didn't know that the current took them out there and they couldn't get back in. So, well, we got out there, and all of a sudden, now we're with them. None of us can get back in. And anyways, they were watching us the whole time. Just waiting in case things got critical or whatever. But and this is what Jesus was doing the whole time. He's got his eyes on the disciples, and they didn't think God was anywhere around. No, God was eyeballing them the whole time, all the while watching and praying for them. Then at just the right time, 3 o'clock in the morning, God knows our limit. Jesus goes walking out there for them and tells them. And they didn't even expect that. That's the furthest place that they thought Jesus would finally show up in. And, you know, I don't see God anywhere helping us. Or how are we in this mess? And where are you, God? Well, he's on his way. He's walking out toward you. He knows exactly where you are. And he tells them, I'm here. Take courage. It's me. I'm here. But notice in the text, it was no longer, who is this man? But, whoa, you're truly the Son of God. The storms, both brought them to that place where he wasn't just my Lord and Savior. No, it became so real to them. You are the Son of the living God. And not just that. We're talking about after the storm. You know, they're all thinking about this once they get to the side where the Gadarene. But you know what happened during that storm? One of them Peter walked on water. He actually walked on water. I wonder if Peter ever tried that again while nobody was looking. But he did. Crystal clear. He walked on water. He did what he never thought was possible. He did it during the storm. While the storm's raging. You think God's nowhere to be found? No. You're going to discover he's very, very near. In fact, in the midst of the storm with you. And you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised what you can endure and what you can do when the storm's kicking up, hot and heavy. And you'll be surprised how a miracle can transpire where you can make it through, and even more than that, make it through. There was no need for him to walk in the water, but he did. His faith was just so challenged that he went over and above what was even needed. He walked on water. And there's things in your life that you cannot imagine. And I've said this to people. I've said these various words. I can't imagine what you're going through. I've talked to parents that have lost their children, lost their daughter. They were there at the time, saw the accident, she's fallen behind, and when he walks over, he knew she was dead. There was just no doubt about it. And he turns to the crowd and just begins to preach to the crowd that's beginning to build up. It's my daughter. She's gone. But I'm here to tell you about Jesus. You'd be so surprised. What God can do is we're in the midst of just the tragedy and crises and the strikes of, the storms that kick up and that's not going to happen to us. I'm not, don't take it wrong. I'm just saying, you'd be surprised the power of God that comes upon you and what you can do in the midst of and during the hard times and the storms. I want to close with this. For the most part, you're not going to get struck by lightning. No, you're going to go through some storms. And you know what I discovered in Fayetteville? When we first got here, it wasn't very long. All of a sudden, a hurricane's coming. I'm from Arizona, okay? Okay, a hurricane's coming. And, I'm listening to my son-in-law, Frankie, and Nick's he's got me in such a panic that I'm down. I don't know how much food I bought at that store. Probably a couple of grocery carts full for a couple months, and then I got these, these big trash cans, brand new trash cans. And I filled them all with water in case the water goes out. So I had like five or six trash cans in the garage that we could dip out of, and we got water for this hurricane that's coming. And I didn't have enough time to board up the windows, screw wood over all my windows, but he did somehow talk me into a generator, buying a generator. Frank. Anybody want to buy a generator? It's only got 30 minutes on it. It's about 7 years old, but only 30 minutes. I bought a generator. The lights are going to go out. And we'll be in the dark, and we're going to lose everything in the refrigerator. And how many cans of beans did we have, Kath? Chicken and tuna and... It came and passed. You couldn't even call it a hurricane. It was like all the other storms I've experienced. It wasn't anything different at all. You know what? That's the reality for the most part. Now there is the strikes. They're few and far, if ever. But that does happen. And God's going to be with you. God's going to help us. He's going to help me. And we'll get through it. But for the most part, they'll come and go. They pass. And they're not going to leave so much lasting damage. We'll weather it. Can you say amen? Father, once again, we recognize